Greetings, music nerds, and welcome to Season 7 of the Music Makers and Soul Shakers podcast. I'm your host, Steve Dawson, coming to you from the Hen House Studio here in East Nashville, Tennessee. I'm so glad you've chosen to join me once again as we take some deep dives with a cast of wonderful musicians, producers, and engineers that I've managed to track down and speak to about making music, records, and just doing what they do in their lives in music. Don't forget there's a link to a playlist on Spotify and Apple Music with links to many of the songs we discuss on today's episode. You'll find links to those playlists in the show notes below or at our website. Meanwhile, the show continues to be largely listener-supported. Your help in keeping the show going is always appreciated, and you can do it with a one-time donation or a Patreon subscription, which is a monthly payment of your choice. And when you sign up for Patreon, you get an ad-free version of the show to listen to, as well as getting entered to win a cunning prize pack from our sponsors at the end of the season. Or if you're tight for dough and you still want to help out, you can subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just by spreading the word, sharing the show, following us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, and telling all your pals about it. You can get links to all this stuff at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Meanwhile, a huge thanks to the sponsors this season. Please check them out and let them know I sent you. They are Union Tube and Transistor, Spectra 1964, the Deering Banjo Company, Mule Resophonic Guitars, and the Hen House Hang. All right, thanks so much to you for tuning in, and let's get down to it. Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is episode number 143. And the first episode of Season 7, which is very exciting. My guest today is the extremely unique and creative songwriter, singer, guitarist, and recording artist, Aaron Lee Tasjan. I'm really excited to get cracking here this week with all new Season 7, and thank you all for tuning in and coming along for the ride. It's been a crazy start to the summer here in Nashville. I've been mostly working on recording sessions, producing and mixing records, doing a lot of that these days. Mostly staying home, although I had a fantastic trip recently up to Prince Edward Island in eastern Canada and worked with a couple of really great artists there and met some amazing fellow producers and musicians along the way, so that's been cool. I'm not doing a ton of gigs this summer for whatever reason, but if you're going to be at the Vancouver Folk Festival, I will see you there. I'll be performing with my band, which are now affectionately called the Hooded Mergansers. As well, I will be backing up Joaquin Cooder, and I will also be backing up Joe Henry at their respective sets, as well as leading a multi-artist project playing some songs by the Grateful Dead. So that'll be a crazy weekend, and I'm really looking forward to that. So hope to see some of you there at my old stomping grounds in Vancouver. And before we get going here, I would just like to shout out to a new donor this week who was generous enough to help support the show. So many thanks to John Barnum. Thank you. All right, on the show this week, we have the very remarkable singer and songwriter Aaron Lee Tasjan. Aaron is also an East Nashvilleian, just like me, but up to this point we had not crossed paths, but he was generous enough to stop by the studio here, and we had a great time talking through his creative process in writing songs and making records. So Aaron has about 5 records out. It's a little fuzzy because there's a bunch of EPs, not to mention albums that he's on by bands that he was a part of before becoming a solo artist. But his latest few are real gems. Those are the ones that I know the best, both in the writing and the incredible production and delivery. So Tasjan, all with exclamations, is the latest one. That's from a couple years ago now. That's one of my faves, along with one called Silver Tears and one called Karma for Cheap. All great records. Make sure you check those out. Aaron had a really interesting path to where he's at now. Starting out, he was playing in bands and in jazz band at high school and kind of toying with a career as a jazz guitarist pretty early on. But then he kind of realized that his real passion was for songwriting, so he left the jazz guitar thing behind. And then there's a number of stints in bands that he was in after he moved to New York, and that's like 15 years ago or something. And one of those was the Semi-Precious Weapons and the greatly named Madison Square Gardeners. So he had those bands for a while, and he even had a stint in the New York Dolls as the guitar player, which is super cool. And he also was a side person for Marc Cohn, who had that huge hit Walkin' in Memphis, which I'm sure some of you remember. So that's all super cool. He relocated to Nashville after that, and that's where his solo career started in earnest. And he's made a string of killer solo records, and he's managed to stay true to his unique sound, but he's also evolved in really interesting ways with each new project. He's in the middle of completing his next album right now, and we talk about that quite a bit. He's collaborated with folks like Sean Lennon, Jack White, Tim Easton, Lilly Hiatt, and he's just been a really busy musician and writer and artist around town here. So you can keep track of all of his work, plus his upcoming tour dates at aaronleetasjan.com. So let's get down to it. Please enjoy my conversation with Aaron Lee Tasjan.
I remember one time when I was living in Brooklyn, one of my friends referred to me as the king of the $50 guitar. And I was like, yeah,
that's something to be proud of.
I'll take that.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of my heroes were into that kind of stuff, like David Lindley and guys like that. Like they made their living playing weird, whack-ass Japanese stuff and weird imported and Sears guitars and things like that, you know. There's a lot of gems in there, man.
Yeah, Buddy Miller's like one of my all-time guitar heroes, and he plays these like weird plastic.
Yeah, those Italian ones, right?
Yeah, he told me one time he found a few of them in a pawn shop, but there was one specific one that
I think the brand is Wandre or something, right?
Yeah, that's
something
right.
Like that.
And he said there was one specific model of it that he really wanted, and the guy had one, but it was like way up high, you know. And he said to the guy, you know, man, I'm really sorry to like, is there any way I could look at that way up there? And the guy said, man, if you can get it down, you can have it.
Oh, so worth it.
Right?
Yeah.
I know.
Oh my God, I think he's got a few of those, right?
Yeah. That's kind of part of his sound, really, are those
I saw him on that
guitars.
Wrecking Ball tour, you know, like back in whatever it was, probably 99 or 2000, and he was playing one of that's the first time I'd ever seen a guitar like that.
Yeah.
And it was like...
They're interesting looking. Yeah. And it's funny, like, he handed me one time, like, we were doing a YouTube video. I was doing a little tour of his studio with him.
Oh yeah.
And he handed me one of them, and I like got it and was kind of looking at it, and it was like there were like pieces of tape like just like holding the pickups in place and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this guy, you know, clearly not the. It's what's the saying? It's not the wand, it's the wizard.
Totally. Have you ever worked with him, like in some sort of capacity of record making? He's never produced a record for you, I don't think.
Not in a record making capacity, but we've worked together on the radio show that he does on Sirius XM.
Yeah.
A few times.
Like you've been a guest host of it, or what?
Yeah. We did a segment where I would sort of be like here's your man on the street in East Nashville telling you about, you know, some new records that have already come out that I'm digging, and some new records that have yet to come out that I'm excited about. Yeah. One time we did a show that was all singer-songwriters' iPhone demos. So we just got a hold of those. Like my neighbor across the street is Kim Ritchie, so I was like, you know, hey, do you have a cool demo of a new song?
Bet she does.
Play it on the show. She sure did. Oh yeah, she had one of the best ones, of course.
Yeah. Maybe we could start by talking a little bit about the evolution that you've had in your career. You know, you've made a few records. You haven't made a ton of records, and you kind of you have a whole other phase of your career that's earlier where you're sort of more of a guitar player, and that's pretty interesting to me as well. But as far as I know you're working on a new record now from what I've read or understood. So I wonder for you, how that process works. You know, I'm sure that for you there's an artistic evolution that happens each time. Feels to me like you don't want to repeat yourself. You're kind of constantly evolving and changing a little bit. Is that something that you really strive for in the record making process? And what's happening this time? Yeah,
I feel like for me, I guess you always have to have sort of defined goals if you're gonna think about whether or not you're a success. For me, doing something that felt like it was breaking some sort of new ground for me personally that I felt really invested in is sort of that's kind of where it's all starts, and ends really, as far as making a new record that I'm satisfied with. And the process has changed some over the years as I've become a more mature person.
Wow, does that really happen?
But yeah, I know. Yeah, not really. What am I calling maturity? I do my laundry now, I guess. I like my first record that I ever made. I had just moved to Nashville, but what ended up making the most sense for the kind of record I was trying to make was for me to actually do it in California with some friends out there.
Yeah.
So I flew to California and rented a car because you kind of need a car in California.
Yes,
it's
you
not
do.
like walkable, really.
Yeah.
So the choice would have been either like get a hotel or rent a car, and I chose car.
Yeah.
I thought it was better to be mobile than comfortable.
It's a good choice.
So
you can always sleep in a car too if you have to.
I did that one night, and then most nights I just slept on the floor of the studio.
So where were you working?
It was a studio called that's still around. That's really great. Called New Monkey.
Okay. Why there? What was there? Was there a connection with a person there or something?
Yeah, a couple connections there actually. Inspiration wise, the main connection would have been that it was the room that Elliott Smith constructed to make Basement on a Hill, and
that's where I know that name from.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a legendary spot to me, and that for that reason.
So is that the place that he built with like Larry Crane? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's in L.A.?
Yeah, it's in the valley basically. Yeah, and they have that legendary Trident console in there, and so it's a cool spot in that way. But then also, I had been playing in a band called Everest, and our co-guitar player in that band, Joel Graves, was one of the owners of the studio, and we had rehearsed a lot of Everest's music in the studio. So I was already very familiar with the space, in addition to being, sort of inspired by the idea of working in a place that Elliott kind of was born out of his mind. It just felt, kind of comfortable in that way. And I think that's really, I want to do the emotional musical equivalent of like taking my shoes off when I'm making a record. I don't want to feel...
It feels that way.
Yeah.
It feels to me like each record has a pretty distinct sonic footprint.
Yeah.
But there's like a clear path that I can see like from one to the next, which is probably, you can't not have that because it's you doing it ultimately.
Sure.
But there is like sonic departures, and there's like clearly different approaches to recording that maybe you've just got more experimental as you go, or maybe you're really sort of gearing towards one path. I don't know how consciously you go into that process. That's just the way it strikes me.
It's pretty intentional. It starts with what serves the music to me, so it's
like after you've written the song,
exactly.
So you kind of look at it as a whole and think like, this would be...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about over preparing and being flexible for me.
Okay.
So it's about having more songs than I need, just in case, for whatever reason, I just can't get the right version of one or something like that, which has been a thing before, where I've had a song that I felt strongly about, and just that moment, for whatever reason, we just didn't get the right version of it, I felt, and so kept it back for that reason. But yeah, it's about kind of having too many songs, but having having the definite like sort of tentpole songs where this is definitely like one of the cornerstones of the foundation that I'm building, and then going into it and with the intention of I want to make the best record that's going to serve this music, these songs, and what I've found is that having a level of, or maintaining a level of curiosity about what that is as I'm going along, is more helpful to me in terms of feeling like I am getting somewhere with it than sort of being like, I'm going to make this kind of record come hell or high water, it's going to be this.
Yeah.
And I'm just not going to stop until it's that. Because I think my experience has been sometimes the ways in which I've sort of accidentally surprised myself have ended up being real bright moments on some of the records of just things that I didn't expect.
Accidents are always,
And so maintaining
totally
that,
to that
openness to that, I feel like helps me to craft something that I, again, just feel is not, unrecognizable as me, but is entering some sort of space that I feel like I haven't done before.
Is that something that you are concerned about as an artist, like keeping people on board with the path that you're taking, like sonically, or like, because it's like, you're one of those people that have changed gears, like maybe not super radically, but fairly radically, I'd say, like particularly the last record was like kind of a departure, although I don't know if it feels like that to you. Sonically, it feels like that to me a bit, but it doesn't feel like completely crazy.
I would say that's accurate.
Is it something that you're aware of keeping tabs on? Is like you don't want to get too out there for the people that follow you, or are you just like doing it to?
I guess I sort of believe in that idea of the audience has to come to the artist and not the other way around. So I guess what I've tried to do is to cultivate. Even if it means it's like a smaller group, a group of people who are interested more in what I'm going to do next than what I've already done. There's a lot of, mythologizing and things like that happen in music, for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes it's because the piece was literally a cultural touchstone, but then also I feel like, we're just, particularly us down here in America, like we're just so fascinated with awful things sometimes. I feel like things get mythologized, maybe just, I don't know, for shock value or I don't even know why. So I've tried to steer myself away from, trying to have, the appearance of being, any sort of like legacy type artist or anything like that, and just be sort of more of the kind of person that's like worth checking in with every now and again, because you kind of just never know like what's going to happen.
You can worry about being a legacy artist 20 years from now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, to me, like the best art always just feels very like in the moment. And I guess like when I say that, I think about just things like the story that I've always heard of like, the recording of like Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding is that, they had already done a session that day, and it was basically the end of the day, and he was like, oh yeah, I've got this one.
Toss it off.
And like that's kind of the take.
Yeah.
And just
throw a whistle solo in there because nobody's around to
me, it just doesn't get any more timeless than that.
Yeah.
And I feel the energy of just the moment that they were in every time I hear that recording, even though it was made, so long ago. To me, it just always, the energy that's on that tape just retains that sort of vibrance, even as time goes on. So that's really the goal, is to just be super in the moment if possible. Yeah.
So with your new record that you're working on, obviously I haven't heard it. I don't know how far along you are. I don't even know if you're comfortable talking about it.
Sure, yeah.
But are there some new things that you're trying out, either like recording wise or space wise or people wise?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Actually, all of those things.
Okay.
So
tell me a bit about the like where you're doing it and what sort of stuff you're going for.
Absolutely. The record took a few twists and turns. Partially, I think, because of how it was done. This was not a record that I worked on sort of like consistently for a period of time. It was more of a record that happened in bursts.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Of time.
Yeah.
Which ended up feeling really sort of refreshing to me in a way.
Like out of necessity, or
just out of like scheduling, basically. It's like, all us working class musicians, we aren't really in the position anymore in the modern music industry to, just be like, I'm going to tour for 6 months and then I'm going to take 3 months off, or whatever. We just kind of always have to keep working. And so, I just kind of scheduled my own record in between other projects, various other projects and touring, of my own that I was doing at the time. And so it started off with 4 of us. It was my person who I've collaborated with on my last 3 records. He's kind of the one mainstay. His name is Gregory Latimer. Most folks know him as the producer of the very first Albert Hammond Jr. Solo album, Yours to Keep, which is my favorite one, actually. It's just, it's such a lovely, weird and lovely record. I don't know how else to describe it other than it's just really lovely and weird. And then Tommy Cyphris.
I know Tommy a little bit. We played in a band together.
Oh, how cool. Yeah, he's a gem, and
he's played with you for quite a while now.
Yeah,
right?
he played with me for a long time. These days he plays with country superstar Lainey Wilson.
Oh, okay.
And has been doing that for the last year or so.
Playing bass for her?
Yeah, playing bass for her. And on that TV show Yellowstone and all that stuff too. So it's been really cool to watch Tommy's career grow in that way. He's so talented.
And he plays bass for you?
Yes, he was playing bass with me. Although, there were gigs that we would do sometimes where he would play guitar and keys as well. And like everybody else from North Carolina, he can also sing. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on over there, but I guess everyone from North Carolina just...
The band I was in with him, he was playing guitar and singing backup, and he was really good at all that stuff.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's just, he has a knack for it. So we had Tommy... Robbie Crowell,
fellow Canadian.
Yeah, just phenomenal musician, multi-instrumentalist. Yeah. I met him initially when he was playing in Deer Tick. These days he plays drums, of course, for the band Midland, in addition to many other projects, producing projects and otherwise that he's involved in. And then the last member of our initial team, Owen Beverly, who's really just another one, who multi-instrumentalist, great songwriter, great singer, really great producer, he might not say this, but he has, I shouldn't say that. Maybe he would. He has a really great knack for like audio engineering as well. And so I just sort of picked people where like.
Are these guys you play live with ever or not really?
Robbie I've played with, and obviously Tommy. I'm trying to think if Owen and I have ever played together live. I don't know that we have.
Okay, so it's like a newish.
Yeah, exactly.
thing. Okay.
Yeah, and I just really respected all of these musicians, and they all do things on their own that I thought my music would benefit from. So it was an easy call to ask them to come in and help. And so we did I think we did like 2 or 3 sessions like that.
Where?
Over at Gregory's studio, which is on Artie Avenue, just here in Inglewood. And it's cool because he has one of those places that has like a backyard with like a garage basically that someone had converted into a studio space already. And his backyard is like really lush, and there's a lot of greenery and like animals. Or it's kind of like recording at Snow White's cottage or something. Like you walk out into the backyard and there's like just squirrels and deer and stuff, and it's really beautiful and nice. We'll listen to playback a lot of times by like just sort of walking out the back door and leaving the door open. Right. So yeah, I would say the bulk of the whole record has been recorded there. But those first couple of sessions and trying to describe the music, I think at one point Robbie said to me, I never thought I would play on a song with the combined influences of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and 3-6 Mafia.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if that wets your whistle,
it sure does.
Yeah, boy, do I have a record for you. No, but so there was, there were those initial sessions. Then
did you guys work pretty much live as a unit, or
pretty much?
Yeah.
I mean, a few overdub things that were mostly like just sound things that we wanted, And the goal was just to get good performances of the tunes,
all brand new songs.
Mm-hmm. And I think we did do like 10 songs like that.
Okay.
And then I kind of got busy for a little bit, but I've also been kind of trying to co-write a little bit more. I've never really done that, traditionally.
So I don't know where I saw it. Maybe it was mentioned in something about your stuff you're working on now, but it seemed to me like you had done that in the past. Did I get that wrong?
I mean, I would say like in the last 2 years, really.
Oh, okay.
I've kind of done that more. And
what are you getting out of that?
Firstly, the consistency of creativity, in that I'm forcing myself to think about songwriting from a perspective that's different than the circumstances I would normally consider it under. And I guess what I mean by that is just like, a lot of times when you're co-writing for someone, there's a specific goal in mind. They're coming in because they're writing for their album, and they're looking to you to enhance that. So, for me, it's about, studying what they've done and seeing if I can get myself into a place where I feel like I'm in sync with, where they've been and
tricky,
where they're
right?
going. It can be, because songwriting is one of those things where I feel like the really great people who are doing it, like their unique voice like emerges through the process of creating a song. And sometimes that voice can be like, very like defining and like idiosyncratic, it's just got its own thing, and it as soon as you hear, certain kinds of songwriters' songs. So, I've always tried to develop that voice in my own writing. And so if I'm consciously writing for someone else's project, I want to try really hard not to like fall back on anything that I would just do for myself just cause,
right. So you're talking about people calling you up saying, "Hey man, I'd like to co-write with you for my project."
Yeah.
And then you started doing that as well for your project. Were you in a position where you wanted to bring in some co-writers? It
was sort of more like, we would just kind of keep, like, I mentioned Kim Ritchie earlier. This was one she had, she and I had talked about writing together, and she was getting some songs together for a record, and we wrote a couple for her, and then in that process ended up just for fun kind of writing one that I felt really strongly about, and ended up wanting to put on my record. Yeah. So I guess that part, the co-writing part of this was a little less intentional in that way. But it was something that I just really wanted to like open myself up to as a means to sort of, create some new channels musically and get some other ideas going.
Cool. That's good.
So, and I felt like, it was really fun to do that this time. and to have more songs on the record that I've co-written with other people than I think I ever have. And sometimes, co-writing is always a tricky process. It's like sometimes I was bringing in very nearly finished songs and
tweaking them or adding a line here and there.
Can you beat me out of I know this could be better. I just don't know how. Could you have any ideas? And so that process proved to be fruitful as well.
I found it takes a lot more guts to show up somewhere without that. With like a blank slate and just be like, I don't know. It's gonna happen.
What do you got? I know. Yeah, I've been in those co-writing situations too, and it I think in the right circumstances it can be good because it sort of raises the bar of like, all right, we really gotta dig in here. But certainly if you're not expecting it, it could also be kind of like, oh no. I had a few collaborators in that way, and then as I had that time in between those initial sessions, I found myself just writing on my own again as well and getting ideas from every which way. Like my sister, who's a fashion writer for the Washington Post, she called me up one day and said, I have no idea why, I just feel like you should write a song about Gianni Versace. Okay. And I was like, hadn't thought of that at all, but why not?
Why not, indeed.
Absolutely. And so I wrote this song that's sort of very indirectly about him. Okay. But I had in my readings about him, I felt that he and his partner seemed to particularly treasure this house that they had in Miami. They felt, particularly at home there and particularly in love there. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that's a kind of a beautiful thing to hang a song on. So I just kind of made it about.
Was it written like from his perspective or just sort of about him?
I mean, yeah, I guess it's a first person perspective. So I suppose in that way, like there is some sort of attempt being made to go there, but it's not. It's the only thing that really ties the song directly to him is that it is based in Miami, and I talk about the street that their house was on.
Okay, I like it.
But yeah, it was just sort of, I guess, more of an inspiration than anything, but definitely like a way to get somewhere new. That's cool. When you think about a place like Miami, to me at least, music is one of the very first things that comes to mind. For sure. I mean,
the Cuban connection.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the big music and artists that have come out of there, certainly, Gloria Estefan and folks like that. And it all has that sound to it that you can tell, like, it's got that Miami thing. Totally. I wanted to experiment with that a little bit. And we also had some hiccup during I'm thinking about this now, the guy who played drums on that song was supposed to come back a couple of weeks later to play drums on a couple more songs, and he got to the airport in Nashville. He was coming in from LA, got to the airport in Nashville, and his wife called him and was like, our kid has COVID, now I have COVID, and I'm feeling so bad, like I can't even like get out of bed to go to the grocery store to get a soup or whatever, and I'm so sorry, but like,
get home.
I kind of need you to come home, and I was like, yeah, man, like, please, like, that stuff is so important. Like, please go home. So there were some pivots and stuff that we had to do just because of the way the world is now. Yep. This process has sort of helped me on this particular record, has sort of helped me almost like see time in a new way or something.
I think we all are too, right? Like,
I think
that's
so.
A pretty legit
feels
thing these days.
Kind of universal, at this point. And traditionally I wasn't a super patient person, I think, and now I kind of I really see the value in sometimes, waiting, or, you've
matured, as you said.
Yeah, right. I started this whole thing off by saying I'm more mature, and now I'm proving it, baby. But yeah, no, it's...
So how long was the process from the first sessions to where are you finished now? Is it done?
We're starting to mix May 29th.
So the whole thing of recording, how long did that take for this record?
That was a year.
Oh, wow.
And 3 months, I would say. Yeah.
So, but spread out.
Yes.
Obviously, you weren't working on it like...
It wasn't a Joe Walsh record from the from the 80s.
I was going to say U2 from the 80s, and then you said Joe Walsh.
Right. Yeah.
That's an interesting way to work, too, is like giving your head a little space in between sessions and letting things sink in. And yeah, that can change how you approach things.
It was great for songwriting as well, because at a certain point, it started to become about, are there holes song-wise that need to be filled? You know?
Would you ever, in that time, if you're dealing with spaces in between sessions, do you go in and think about how you could improve a song and suddenly you want to like swap out a line and things like, did that happen a lot?
I even will like sort of conduct my own sessions just like at home, trying out, I'll have a stereo, wave of our rough mix up and just be looking for the right guitar part or the right sound sometimes, synth sound or whatever it is. And I'll spend, a day just at home, to find the right thing for one thing. Yeah. Just because in this day and age, it's just like in the way that we can all record at home now, like it's just so much more cost effective to do. I'm not wasting a day, at my friend's studio on that. When I'm there, I know I have a list of things that I'm just doing. The sort of spaced out working schedule this time really benefited in me in terms of, there wasn't, it wasn't just 2 weeks or something, where, it's like, okay, I
got to get this knocked out.
And this is it, if I don't, like, I'm
pretty much used to working
fix it in the mix,
totally.
It's like, I mean, that's a very real thing.
It is,
with the way that budgets are these days for making records. So, it was nice to have that space where, I was just thinking to myself, I wonder if you actually added up the number of days that we did work over the last year and a half or a year and 3 months or whatever, like how long that would actually, because it certainly wouldn't be a year. Right. I mean, that's for sure.
But if you tally up all the times you're sitting there dinking around with guitar sounds, like maybe it is a year, right?
Maybe. That's a good point. Yeah. Actual studio time, maybe not, but maybe with that, Yeah.
So the record before, Tasjan, that had some hallmarks, like sonic hallmarks, like some real cool fuzzy guitars and crazy synths and stuff, and some really cool lap steel stuff too, which I wanted to ask you about. I don't know who does that. Is that you or is that?
That's my friend Joshua Kaler.
Okay, he's really good.
He's super good.
So are there sonic hallmarks to what you're working on now that are either similar or different, but like that record had a real vibe with some of those things that were like heavily featured more?
I think this next record is, to me, it almost felt like on the last one, I kind of started down that path. And this one is almost kind of like either finishing or possibly expanding on that thought.
Yeah. Interesting.
Where, there's definitely some things that I've just never done on my music at all. There's some drum programming and things like that on this. It's very organic sounding.
Do you get your mitts into that stuff, or do you rely on people to bring that to the party?
That was, sometimes I do. In this case, it was dependent on the song. But that was one of the, like Robbie Krauss, really great with that stuff, so I had brought him in to do some of that. My other friend, Aaron Steele, who has worked on the last couple of Portugal the Man records, really great drummer and really great just composer and arranger, but he's really good with that stuff too. So we had him in on some later sessions doing some of that. And then there was one song that Gregory did the programming on, and it to me, it was so it made such a significant impact on the song that I actually gave him songwriting credit.
Oh, cool.
On the song for it. Because to me,
just
as a
radically changed the way that you approached
exactly. If whatever you did that is a part of the creative process with me alters the way that I'm going to sing the song like every single night of my life, then to me that's songwriting. I think sometimes songwriting can be confusing as far as like what really it confusing. Is. Yeah. Because just
ask the band.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah, I know. And all that. And obviously there's like the way that the music business economy is at this point. It's like I want people to be able to survive, you know, and if somebody contributes in that way and you can give them that credit, and then something good happens with the song or whatever, like that's more for them down the line, obviously, and stuff. So it's a
sign of respect too that people appreciate, I think, you know, and
definitely.
It's like it helps with the general vibe of a project too.
Absolutely.
Like
when
the goodwill,
people,
you know?
I think when people feel like they're contributing to something that they're genuinely interested in and that their contribution is valued and appreciated in a way that's like palpable.
Yeah, that's a palpable way.
You know, it definitely can rearrange some molecules in the room as far as like just keeping it like, we're all on this train together.
At this point in the show, I'd like to thank our amazing sponsors for the season. We couldn't do it without their support, and this year they are Mule Resophonics. Swing wider for inspiration with Mule Resophonic guitars. These are Resophonic guitars built for acoustic guitar players. Not just blues guitars, not just slide guitars. You don't need to play them in open tunings. They're set up with normal acoustic guitar action, and they have some of the best feeling necks in the game. Trust me, they're wicked. These musical tools wake up your ear and influence your playing towards uncharted musical realms. Check out the current lineup of guitars at the Mule store at muleresophonic.com. Thanks to Deering. Deering Banjos makes some of the finest instruments out there these days and caters to all levels as well. If you're just getting into the banjo, they offer their incredible Good Time series, which are high-quality instruments at lower prices. Deering Banjos are all made in the USA, and their website also features some incredible info on their products and just general banjo information. And now Deering is also making Pro Pick finger picks and thumb picks, and that's exciting because I've been using those finger picks for years. They make these cool ones with the fingertips missing, and I love those. They're the best. You can get info on the banjos and the finger picks over at deeringbanjos.com. Thanks to Spectra 1964. For over 50 years, Spectra 1964 has established a reputation of creating some of the most innovative recording equipment on the market today. Their consoles and preamps were behind the sound of so many great American studios of the 1960s through to today. Spectra 1964 continues the legacy of providing incredible recording products for the home or professional studio. Check them out at spectra1964.com. Union Tube and Transistor. Union is known for guitar effects pedals with a focus on quality and simplicity. They build durable, repairable products that sound amazing both on stage and in the studio. Their fuzz effects and compression pedals are insanely cool. I use the Sonebender Fuzz, the Moore pedal, the Lab, and the Swindle Overdrive all the time in sessions and live on stage. You can find out more about them at uniontone.com. And finally, the Henhouse Hang is a 3-day immersive recording experience at the Henhouse Studio in East Nashville with me, Steve Dawson. It'll be in September 2023 and then upcoming again in September of 2024. Join us for a musical learning experience like no other. We'll show you the ropes of recording roots and Americana music by bringing you in on a real session with real musicians working on real songs from the ground up. You can get all the info at stevedawson.ca. Just follow the links on the front page to the Henhouse Hang. All right then, let's get back to the show. All right, cool. So that's like this new project that I haven't heard. I have no idea what it's like, but I can imagine it's going to be super cool. So it's going to come out sometime probably in 2024.
Yeah, early next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the last record, which came out, I don't know when.
2021.
21. Okay.
Yeah.
So was it a pandemic recording or pre-pandemic, or when did you make it?
It was pre-pandemic. It got made mostly during 2019.
Okay.
And then just a few things kind of buttoned up right at the top of 2020 before everything went haywire.
You were totally done, mixed, mastered everything by 2020?
We were not. We took a beat on the mixing because we couldn't decide. Gregory had made some really amazing sounding like reference mixes, just to sort of like show someone like our intention. And several people were like, I don't know, man.
Really?
Yeah, like this sounds really good, you guys. Like, I don't know if you need a mixer, you know. Yeah. And so there was. Does
he not consider himself a mixing person, or was it just always the intention that it was going to get done by somebody else?
I think that was maybe a label thing, where the label.
That's still a thing where labels are like, you got to get some big, like a name to do it.
It wasn't at that time. They were. I was, in their eyes, I was sort of, an unproven entity as a producer, So I think that was the sort of like safety net that could exist.
Is that record self-produced?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, I wish you could get credits easier.
Yeah. I know.
It sucks, man.
It's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
I was glad to see at least some amount of crediting eventually show up on Spotify, because I do think it's, for those of us who are, creative people and also users of those kind of platforms. Obviously, this isn't going to be everybody, but like we have that. We're coming to it from that place of like, yeah, who did this?
To me, it's just such an oversight in the industry that like, okay, so now we all give our music away for free. The least we could have done is like ingrain this thing where you can just pop like hit a button and it tells you who's playing pedal steel on a song.
Yes.
That's what I want to know.
Seriously.
And it's really, you got to dig for that shit.
I know. I've been actually, it's interesting, like, because I've been thinking, I was like, I wonder if that's like marketable in some way, as far as like telling the story of the record, like maybe there's a way, that's one of the things that I've been thinking about as we prepare to release this next album. Is like, maybe there's a way to do something that's kind of like interactive in some way with that, with the credits of the record, you know? So I've been mulling that around in my mind, but yeah, I'm sorry, what was the question? I'm sorry.
We were just talking about credits and you were talking about mixing and
yes. So we did take a second and then we ended up settling on a mix engineer who we both completely revere and had wanted to work with for a long time.
Who is that?
John Congleton.
I know that name from somewhere and I can't think of where I know him from.
He's done many projects that I'm a fan of. He does his own music as well, which is really, really interesting. But I guess the reason that he came to mind for me was I was hearing this really great song on the radio a lot at that time called Dylan Thomas. And it was a side project by Phoebe Bridgers and Connor Oberst called the Better Oblivion Community Center.
Yep.
And it had this really cool, it was a folk song, folk rock song, acoustic and electric guitars and drums and bass. And vocals, and but man, when the chorus kicked in, it had this amazing like sub low end thing happening that I had just never heard in the context of that kind of music. And I just thought, wow, this is such a great innovation in that world to me. And it's so funny how like it's such a, it can be such a small thing like that catches your ear.
That's all it takes though, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the magic of like just letting something really simple happen. And then, you know, developing that idea organically, you know, can feel really powerful. Like you don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel to do something that has a freshness to it. And so that characteristic just popped out right away. And luckily for me, you know, I was on New West at the time, and Joel Habershaw, the radio guy there, knew John's work very well and was super supportive of me working with him and stuff. And so we basically sent like completely raw files, you know, to John, because we just really wanted to let John be John,
do his
you
thing.
know.
Yeah.
And he did. We had created to me a much more sort of 70s sounding kind of sonic palette, very, just everything super warm and all that stuff. And John heard the record in a way that, you know, when all was said and done, to me ended up feeling a little bit more modern, just in terms of you know, how he had things EQ'd and you know, certain elements of how he was using effects and all that kind of thing.
Was it radically different from what you'd rough mixed previous to him getting the files?
Some of it was. Like Up All Night, the label was somewhat Swiss on that song. Like they were not like fully, you know, they were a little neutral on it, you know.
What you meant by that.
They were just kind of like there was some neutrality, I think, about that song, where they were like, you know, we don't hate it, we don't love it, you know, we kind of don't know. And they had sort of tasked me with, you know, could you? I had asked the president of the label, is there something I can give you on a record that I haven't given you before?
That's generous of you.
For this album. It was my last one for them, and I really wanted to.
You had a X number of.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really wanted to just, you know, give it everything I had. And he was like, yeah, I mean, you know, a sort of a definable like radio song, he thought would help, and I wrote tons of songs trying to do that.
That seems like the kind of thing where the harder you try, the farther you're going to get from it.
I could play you just garbage that from that time. It just is so bad. But it was one of those things where the more I did it, the further away I feel like I got. And Up All Night had been an idea that Gregory and I had been kicking around for a while, and I ended up finding a new space for that song when I kind of switched over to playing keys on it, because it had been a very strummy Tom Petty.
It's very much like that, yeah.
But suddenly when I kind of sat down at the piano and played this really insistent, which ended up becoming the synth part on that record, that instantly felt just a new angle for the song itself, and it ended up changing how I was hearing the verses. And I was able to then sort of rewrite those verses.
So you went back in and re-sang it too?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We probably had 2 or 3 different versions of that song by the time we were done.
Yeah.
And
searching, did you feel like that song was the one that you were going to accomplish that radio thing with?
I felt like it had the best chance. You know,
I totally get that.
Landing in that space. And you know, when we sent it to John for mixing, I think I said something like, I just don't. Can you try to make it sound like something other than what it like obviously is? You know, can you help me just sort of steer it away from
was what in your mind?
Which to me was like a sort of very like you know, Tom Petty-esque, you know, sort of mid-tempo Americana, you know, folk rock song. And I feel like, we were able to do that. I have no desire to like try to hide what influences my music. Like
totally.
I think
you're really good at that. Like you wear them on your sleeve, but also like manage to incorporate them into what you do as an artist.
Yeah,
and
that's
it doesn't sound like a imitation or anything.
Right.
But you can hear them. Like I hear, Petty, and I hear Elliott Smith, and I hear John Prine, and all those things.
Totally. And so it wasn't about hiding that at all, but it was just about finding a space within the context of those luminary artists where I felt like I could live and be authentic and not feel like I'm cheapening what the greatness of what they've done by just doing a C- version of that, And when John sent the mix of Up All Night back, Gregory and I both knew immediately, like, this is our best contender for radio song
that's cool.
or whatever.
And how did the label respond? Was it what they were looking for?
Yeah, they basically were like, "Oh yeah, this has changed. We now understand the value of this song as it exists on the record, and then also as it exists like outside of the." So it's really funny, sometimes our perception of what we're hearing can be colored by the sort of the other touchstones that it makes us think of. If you hear a song, for example, and it makes you think of a specific artist or whatever, immediately, and that artist's doesn't happen to be particularly appealing to you,
right.
You may not you may be less enthralled, with what's happening, because it's just not something that you're super into. Whereas I think, to me, one of the exciting things that happens in music sometimes is when I'm hearing a song and I'm like, normally I probably wouldn't like this, but man,
bring it on.
This person or these people have really figured out a way to do this that's like captivating me and making me feel like I didn't know myself as well as I thought I did, which is always exciting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me about the process for that record. Like, how much are you playing guitars? How much are you playing synth? Like, what's your role in the actual session process for that record, Tasjan?
Yeah, there was a lot. That was the first record I really got into sort of a lot of keys stuff on.
Is that something you've got to, like, I don't know your history playing keyboards. Is that something you've done a lot of in the past? Not at all.
It sort of started around that record. Mm-hmm. I decided that was a voice that I thought I should try to develop.
Yeah.
I had some skills, but I had really only utilized them so far as whenever they were necessary. If we were in a studio somewhere and someone was like, well, B3 would sound great on this, but it's, 1 a.m, I would just be like, well, I'll figure it out, and go play something that worked. So, during that time, I decided I wanted to start trying to develop that voice. And, it really happened. It was so funny because, the way the pandemic sort of fell into the middle of the process of putting that record out, I actually did have a lot of time all of a sudden to really develop that skill set. The first part of the learning curve of doing that was making the recording, and sometimes having to, I'm very lucky in that I've been recording something usually since I was about like 12 years old. I bought a Tascam Porta 02.
Wicked. Those are going to come back.
Yeah. When I was 12, and just started, kind of set up shop in my bedroom and kind of never stopped, So I got to the point where if it's a guitar or a bass or even drums or like vocals or something like that, I can usually pretty quickly get my idea together and down. But obviously, trying to learn a new instrument at the same time, or sort of expand my skill set on an instrument at the same time.
What sort of tools were you using? Like, what did you have at your disposal synth-wise that you didn't have before?
a Prophet 9,
Okay.
one of the newer Prophet 9s, which are really cool because those keyboard, like one of the features of the newer ones is like the keyboards are also like have touch sensitivity now. So you can even do things like if you strike the key with a certain level of intensity, you can actually, it'll basically do the same thing that like the tone wheel would do if you just waggled it a little bit or something. You know,
that's cool.
There's all these little, kind of modern tricks to it where you can do some pretty fun, interesting sounding stuff. So there was that. As I mentioned, or was mentioning earlier, I used to be the king of the $50 guitar, but that's kind of just true of like music stuff. And I collect a lot of junk.
Mm-hmm. It's good. It's a good feature.
One of the things that I got that was definitely not a piece of junk, but is definitely maybe somewhat of a collector's item, the Fun Machine.
Oh, I used to have the Baldwin Fun Machine.
Exactly.
Oh my God. Yeah. That was my favorite. When I moved from Vancouver, I foolishly got rid of my Fun Machine. Did it light up like a Cadillac along the front? Oh my God. Those are the greatest.
Yeah. And it's so, for something like songwriting, it's so...
Built-in drum machine.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, there was I ended up even getting an app. I found there was like an app, like an iPad app that you could get.
Is it called Fun Machine?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because it's for those of you who don't know or haven't ever seen one, like it's not like the most mobile. You can't really just pack it up and like take it down to the gig. Without an extra set of hands around.
It's bulky.
Yeah.
But not that heavy, actually.
Right.
You could take it to a gig.
It's just very awkward. You can't, like one person can't really, move it.
So you bought a Fun Machine? You found a Fun Machine somewhere?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And I had that going. And then as we were recording, just found the app on the iPad and just started using that. And that was great because like it had like an on-off switch on the app, which is just hilarious because you could, on the app version, you could like hold a key down and like turn the on switch on and it would literally go like that. So that, became like its own instrument,
right?
And you hear a lot of that on Another Lonely Day.
Okay.
There's a lot of moments from that little iPad thing that ended up on the song.
That's a really cool thing about that song because I'm guessing it was a guitar written song, right? Like it's very finger picky. It's got like, that's the central thing. And then texturally, there's all this other interesting stuff going on.
And that was kind of the idea of that one, I think, a little bit, was sort of some of the sort of Jim O'Rourke kind of approach to folk, where you just sort of, create this bed, or I guess Wilco, would be another example, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, but you sort of create this bed of, just kind of magical weirdness that you just play a folk song over top of, and you just kind of let it run and then you see those moments where it really enhances what's happening and you feature it there and maybe you just mute it the rest of the time or something I mean you might spend an hour or whatever like generating this bed of noise that you end up using in the song for one chorus or something, but
hey, it's worth it.
It totally is, because there's nothing that I love more on a record as like a fan than just being like, what instrument even is that?
Plus to me it ties a song like that in with a lot of the other more band-oriented or heavier tunes.
Totally.
That's like, that might stick out in a weird way if it didn't have some of that stuff going on.
It's true. I think, that's part of the like curating process of like making a record is sometimes having a song like that could really be a potential standout moment, but then you have to like pay very close attention to like how you're putting it together to make sure that it's like a standout moment in a good way, and not like what you were saying, kind of like a sore thumb or something.
Is somebody like Elliott Smith an influence on your guitar playing and writing in that way too? Like he was a real accomplished finger picker, even though he doesn't really like, you wouldn't know it. Like he was a monster, like classical player too.
Oh my goodness,
right? Like,
yeah.
But do his recordings inspire your writing process?
Definitely. I mean, I studied classical guitar when I was a kid.
Oh,
yeah. And
like how deeply?
When I was in the 8th grade, I was admitted to a high school called the Idlewild Arts Academy, which is in the San Jacinto Mountains of California.
Okay.
And they basically admitted me as an 8th grader to the high school because they didn't have any classical guitar majors on campus. And the guy who was the classical guitar instructor there was this guy named Terry Graves, who had a master's degree in classical guitar from the University of Indiana, which is one of the finest music schools in America. So he was a real, incredible player. And I basically went there as my guitar playing up until that point had been purely a vehicle for me to write songs. And so I went into my audition for the Idlewild Arts Academy, here's these songs that I wrote, Yeah. And Terry was just kind of like, wow, man, that's really amazing, and just showed me a couple of things while we were sitting there, oh, check this out. Can you do this? And can you do that? They were really more simple kind of finger, picking things. And I gravitated toward them pretty quickly. And
how accomplished were you previous to that on were you sight reading and
Not initially, because I really came to the guitar as a lover of songs. So my goal initially was, God, I'd love to be able to play America by Simon and Garfunkel, or something like that. Yeah. And and I had a guitar teacher early on in California who, our approach to learning the guitar was based around songs, but he would explain to me musically,
yeah,
what was happening,
disguising theory in the
basically,
context of an Oasis song.
Totally, no, okay. Because he would say, look, so technically speaking, the first chord of this song is E minor, but the way that Noel Gallagher is voicing he's also fretting the B string and the high E string there at the 3rd fret, and so he's kind of doing these add 9 chords, and that's not the same thing as just regular old E minor, Yeah. So he would kind of explain those sort of things. So I had a working idea of theory, I knew the names of most of the chords that I was playing and all that, but I had no interest in playing lead guitar. I had no interest in playing a guitar solo, zero. I just wanted to be a really great rhythm guitar player. The first thing that I tried to master as a guitarist was John Lennon's guitar part on Close Your Eyes and I'll Kiss You.
It's a great guitar part. Yeah, it's a hell of a solo.
The whole time. It's so good. Well, except for the chorus part, when it goes gank, gank. But the verses, it's just all that. It's so wonderful and strange and just gives this energy to the music. And I was like, that's where the energy comes from, in the context of a guitar in a band, is actually the rhythm. It's not the solos, So I want to be a part of what's giving the band energy.
That's hard for a kid to come up with that that philosophy. That's pretty cool, man.
There were a lot of songs that I loved,
What were the other big ones for you that really got you into playing in a band in the first place?
You
mentioned Oasis,
rhythm guitar wise,
just in general,
or just in general. Okay, yeah. It was a really wide variety of stuff because I started playing the guitar when I was 11 years old, and that was 1995. And so the songs that I was hearing, that I was connecting with, in that way, initially were all songs that kind of featured like the acoustic guitar in big ways. And it didn't matter to me if it was Horse Had No Name by America or Runaway Train by Soul Asylum. It was
just all cool shit to you.
Anything that had that big strummy acoustic guitar, fast,
and
slow.
were you good at picking this stuff out by ear, or did you okay?
I got very quickly to where if I was listening, particularly like on headphones, like on my Walkman or something, I could be like, that's a G chord. I just know, I can hear how the strings are ringing out.
Yep. And how quickly did that become writing songs to you?
Immediately. I mean, my mom had a guitar, so I was able to borrow her guitar for a little bit before I bought my own. But just having that guitar available to me, I think before I'd even had a lesson or anything, I was trying to play it, but in the context of writing a song.
Did you have any point of reference at all, or was it just completely random? You were trying to put your finger down and see what happens. Yeah.
That. I was so naive. That I think it was to my benefit because
like you didn't have a friend down the street or an older brother that was like, here's a G chord.
I know, right? Yeah, it's I mean, so many, legendary bands were started because of guys like that. I feel like, but no, I never did. I was like the first song that I wrote, which I have no idea how it went or what it was about or anything, but I had a friend, when I was, the reason I started playing guitar, my family moved to Southern California from Delaware when I was 11, and a friend of mine from school, he was kind of getting bullied really badly in school, and I wrote a song for him and I recorded it. I had no idea what I was doing. That's why I said I just have no clue what it was. But I put it on like a Radio Shack cassette tape and like sent it to him in the mail.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like there was always from the very beginning, there was like an intention to
There's a purpose to it.
Yeah. And to try and write something, I would say, just to like fully answer your question that you just asked like a few minutes ago about like what really got you into, wanting to play music and songs and stuff. That was like also the Beatles anthology was happening then.
Yeah, right.
And my mom was such a big fan, and kind of reliving her fandom.
It was a big deal too.
Yeah.
Like it really like
huge.
Yeah.
And Jeff Lynne, who is also an influence on the Tasjan record. He was the go-to producer for that stuff.
All the Wilbury stuff too. And
all of that.
He had a huge kind of heavy hand in that, and all that stuff too.
Yeah, he almost. I mean, I think George Martin is like definitely the fifth Beatle. But if there was a sixth Beatle,
what about Billy Preston?
Yeah, Billy, man, you cannot deny the incredible contributions that Billy made to that music.
But then Jeff Lynne,
and that so seventh Beatle. But yeah. That was definitely a big part of my world at the time, and so the songs thing just was born out of this desire to connect with people in a different way.
Yeah.
I wasn't a great communicator as a kid. I was kind of shy, and I was worried a lot that I think I was savvy enough to know that I was not cool and that I was not going to become cool at any time. So, I was a bit world weary maybe in the sense of just not being sure of myself, from a very young age. And
that's why a lot of people get into it. I think
music just felt like such a natural way to communicate for me because it was a defined setting, a period of time, and I just had to be in the moment for that period of time. And once it was over, I was just back in my bedroom at home. And
were you finding bands and stuff immediately as a young kid? Did you have friends that were playing and little scenes or bands that were getting into, or were you pretty much just sticking to your room and your 4-track?
When I first started playing, there was a couple of kids at school, older kids. The school that I was at that time was like a elementary school, middle school, and high school, like the full thing. And so there were, you would run into the upperclassmen from time to time, and there were a couple of kids who had bands. The most influential one was a guy called John Bellicanta, and he was just like, the coolest guy in the world to me. And he ended up starting this band called Lola Ray, that Good Charlotte signed.
Oh yeah.
And they were on MTV and the whole thing, and were kind of rock stars for a minute. After he was in college and stuff.
This is California.
Yeah, Southern California. But John was like the coolest guy. Like I remember, he came to school one day and he was like, dude, man, have you heard this Radiohead album, OK Computer? Like, it is just unbelievable, man. Like, you gotta listen to it.
He turned you on to some.
And I didn't even understand it. I listened to it. I was 12, and I don't. Yeah, it was beyond me. I still was very.
Yeah, you have to have some deep points of reference to really figure out how deep some of that kind of music can be.
I was liking the earlier Beatles stuff, at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, pop songs, really, and obviously there are pop songs on that record, but you kind of, as you just said, you need to be a little bit more musically versed to fully understand what's happening there. But I did, I listened to that record for like 3 years, not knowing why. And then eventually, was like, oh man, I get it now, forever grateful to John for that one. But, he was just that kind of guy. But yeah, there weren't tons of bands around. I mean, I had two classmates who played. One, Max Mahaffa played the drums, and Corey Westrop also played guitar. So we were sort of like a
band.
Yeah, we were like a power trio with no bass player.
That's cool.
Basically. Yeah. And we did one gig where we just played in Corey's driveway. But we went around his neighborhood, and kind of invited the neighbors to come down and put a tip bucket out or something.
Nice.
And I was such a dork that I took all the money we made and I gave it to the Parent-Teacher Association of our school.
Wow. It's the one and only time that ever happened.
But we got in the school paper for it, so...
That's called payola.
Right, exactly, man. I was greasing palms when I was like, in the 5th grade, just trying to make it happen.
So you've got like this string of interesting bands that happened when you moved to New York. Like you moved to Brooklyn. So was that a musical move or was that a family move?
It was a musical move. When I was in high school...
That's a big move. That's a terrifying thing to do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean...
Did you know anyone you were in Brooklyn, right?
No, I didn't know a soul. I had done a jazz band competition when I was in high school that took place in New York. And I just became completely enthralled. We were only there for 4 days or something like that, but we got to do like our jazz band director, he knew his way around New York. He had been a long time associate of Wynton Marsalis and knew a lot of folks from the Lincoln Center world. But, so he was taking us to hear, Nicholas Payton play at the Iridium.
Wow.
And that's like a 17-year-old kid. I was just like looking at these guys like in these suits, man, and just crushing musically. Yeah. Just like so inspiring. And then they were so nice to us afterwards, but also kind of like sort of setting a bar of,
a high bar.
Yeah. Like, hey man, don't get up on that bandstand unless you have worked this shit out in advance.
Yeah. It's a big lesson.
Yeah. You're not going to fake your way through Laura's theme. Right. You need to know those chords, you need to know those standards and all that kind of stuff. And so
were you getting into jazz?
I was, yeah.
You were? Okay.
Like
standards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I played guitar in the Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra.
Okay.
And so we were doing a lot of Ellington tunes. We were doing some bassy stuff, which was great for me because
Were you playing like a lot of rhythm, like Grant Green kind of stuff, or was it more like figuring out solos and melodies?
My big hero was the Count Basie orchestra guitar player Freddie Green.
Freddie Green, right?
And he didn't even use an amp.
Just an arch top.
Yeah.
Ripping.
With just strings that were like, like telephone wires, giant string, but you can hear him over the whole band.
Right.
He sits in with the drums, and it's that ka-chink, chink, chink,
Totally.
ka-chink, 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 chink thing, and it gives it that sort of that duple up kind of feel when it swings, So that was my inspiration. And it's funny, I was the only kid at that. The competition was at Avery Fisher Hall at Lincoln Center, and it was jazz bands from all over the country, and I think there were 15 bands that competed. You had to go through a process of being selected to compete. So I don't know how many applied. 15 got chosen. Our band was one of them. I was the only guitar player at the whole thing that didn't play a solo.
Okay.
And I won the
Guitar player
award.
Wicked. Well, you probably ripped on those chords, man.
Because I think maybe there was some sort of, they could tell I was really paying attention to what the role of my instrument in that music really was, and trying as hard as I could to serve that,
right.
And that was a valuable lesson for me too, because it was like, even though technically I won like an award, which is kind of hilarious, but it was but the real message I took away from it is just like the reward is in serving the music.
Right.
You don't try to shine.
Yeah.
You try to serve the music, and if you do that, then that's rewarded with good music being made, basically.
Totally.
So I had done all that, and when I graduated from high school, I actually had a scholarship for jazz guitar performance to the Berklee College of Music in Boston. Great school, but definitely a very or at least at that time, it was a very specific kind of player they were trying to develop. Yeah. I was really, you mentioned Grant Green. He was one of my absolute favorite jazz guitar players. But Grant Green, Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, the sort of golden.
So you were in deep. You were like kind of thinking of pursuing the jazz thing at that time?
I was.
Okay.
My friend Aaron Deal, who ended up playing in Wynton's septet. He was in the same band. He was the piano player in the band, in the jazz band. He ended up playing in Wynton's septet when we were like 17 or 18 years old. I mean, he was just off the charts. But he and I would get together. For us, a big Saturday night, in high school was like, man, let's get the Jamie Aebersold Giant Steps book and see if we can figure out how to blow over giant steps. That was our partying or whatever, that we did. And so, we were serious about it. We wanted to sound good. Aaron was off the charts. Incredible. And that was what I sort of figured out when I got to Berklee, was that I felt like a very competent jazz guitar player who could do that effectively. But seeing how some of the other kids were already developing a sound and an approach to it that felt completely unique to me when I was hearing them. I was like, I don't have that when it comes to this.
Yeah.
So
you did go to Berklee.
I did. I went there for 6 months.
Okay. And then you just split.
I was just thinking about New York the whole time I was there. And I almost went to New York thinking, I just need to get this out of my system. because I'm not really being present at Berklee in a way where I'm going to get the most out of this that I possibly can. So maybe what I should do is just go to New York for like a year and get rid of this, you know, and then I'll go back and be able to be more focused and, you know, kind of on the ball, you know, and figure out what I actually want to do here. Because that was another part of it, is like sort of suddenly not being so sure about the jazz thing.
Of course, that'll do it.
You know, I kind of I was feeling
That's kind of what
lost,
happened to me too.
Right? And I didn't want to just like be, you know, particularly having like a scholarship, you know, I was like, well, I don't just want to like go through these 4 years and then come out and just be like, well, I guess I have a degree, but like, I mean, whatever, you know. And then New York, it just clicked, you know, immediately.
You got into bands pretty quickly.
I found this.
You had a whole string of bands there.
Yeah. I found this guy, Justin Tranter, through a Boston connection. Justin had gone to Berklee, and you know, he had been doing a solo project and had been going really well in New York. He was selling out the Knitting Factory and stuff like that on his own in the big room, and he was looking for a partner to start a rock band with. You know, he wanted to do something a little different, and so Semi-Precious Weapons was born out of that. You know, and he and I, you know, took that.
Were you singing in that band at all, or were you just playing guitar?
Harmonies, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying really hard to be the, you know, the Keith of that, and so it was interesting because it was my first time participating in the songwriting process as not a lyric writer. Okay. You know, I was just really trying hard to design
cool guitar shit.
Yeah. And I remember vividly like sitting around the house playing idea after idea after idea that I could come up with while Justin was doing something else, just hoping he would hear one and turn around and be like, oh, what's that? Let's do something with that one. You know, it became like, you know, my goal in life, you know, was to just come up with one of those a day. And so, we built a great thing with that, and then I was in the office of our record company. We got a record deal. I was in the office of our record company waiting to talk to the guy who had signed us about something, and I was outside of his office, and I could hear him on the phone. I don't think he knew I was there. I could hear him on the phone talking to someone about our band, and I remember he referred to us as his gimmick band. And I was like, I don't really even know if I know exactly what that is, but like I know it's not good if the guy who signed you is calling you that.
Oh my God,
know?
That's terrible.
Because I was like 23 at the time.
Right.
You know, I was super young and green, and this was the first time I'd ever, you know, really had a true brush with the music industry, you know, for real. And so, that really got in my head, and I ended up kind of stepping away from that band. Started a group called the Madison Square Gardeners.
I love the name of that band. Thank you. It's a great name. Yeah.
We had a really great run as like sort of, you know, the local New York.
And you're still playing guitar strictly, or with
that
or
one.
with...
That was I started to sing. Like that band was cool because we had multiple lead singers for different songs. So, you know, but I was writing the bulk of the material we were doing.
Okay.
You know, and sometimes even trying to kind of Wilburys it a bit and being like, okay, I got this song and it's got 4 verses. So you do the first one and I'll, you know, blah, 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 you know, that kind of a thing. But the focus was we were trying to be kind of like somewhere between like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and like Johnny Thunder's Heartbreakers.
Nice.
A little more ramshackle, you know, a little more kind of dangerous on stage and you know, taking some chances in that way.
And speaking of Johnny Thunders, you also had a gig with New York Dolls too, right?
I did, yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
It just so happened that when I stepped away from Semi-Precious Weapons, we had done some work with Tony Visconti in that band. When Tony had come to see our band to decide whether or not he wanted to work with us, he just happened to bring Sylvain from the New York Dolls with him. And also Steve Conti, who was playing the Johnny Thunders role in the band in the reformed version at that time. And I just hit it off with both of those guys, because we love guitars,
right.
So it was just that thing. And then Steve and his wife had been trying to have a baby for several years, and they finally got pregnant, and we're really excited about that. And Steve just wanted to be able to be home for that, and so the easy solution was sort of like, man, Scylla already knows this guy and he likes him, and so
you just got a call.
Yeah.
Hey, can you come and do this tour?
He literally called me up and he said, man, I was thinking of you for something. And then I went to this like Semi-Precious Weapons page, and it seemed like you're not in that band anymore, and I was like, yeah, I kind of stepped away and I've been doing this and da-da-da-da-da. And he was like, well, that's great news actually for me, because I need someone to cover these gigs for me. And I remember him saying, please don't mention that you're doing this for a while, because there's a lot of people who are probably going to be mad at me for not calling them.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people...
Did you know all that stuff already?
I knew some of it,
okay.
Not all of it by any stretch, no. But
so you had some homework to do.
Oh yeah. It was 35 songs.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And one rehearsal where we didn't even play through
really
the entire song.
And then they just threw you into the fire.
Yeah, I mean, we would literally sit there and David would call out songs or whatever, and we would play verse and a chorus. And David would just be like, sounds good, And then we would kind of move on to the next one.
Band leading 101.
And if you know the Dolls catalog, I mean, they have some of these insane songs. Like they have this song called Frankenstein, where the song is just goes on and on and on and on. And I don't know that anything ever repeats in that song,
right.
Not even one time.
Oh my God.
And it's also 3-chord rock and roll. And even though that's maybe sounds simple.
There's nothing simple about that.
It's so crazy how just a few chords constantly rearranged like that can just be the biggest mind trick, you've ever had to maintain. So
did you prepare a lot for? Okay. So you showed up prepared. You knew your shit. Yeah.
I really wanted them. My goal was that David will be up there singing these songs and maybe look to the side of the stage and be like, oh, yeah.
There's some new guy there.
It's Aaron,
Right.
Well, he called me son because he thought he was old enough to be my dad. So he would always, son. But
that's crazy, man. What a crazy thing.
Yeah. Oh, it was so fun and such an honor.
How long did that last for?
Just a couple months, It
was basically like a tour, and then you were.
I did
done.
I did this tour of South America, and I came back from that, and there was still some questions around when Steve was going to return, so I did a few things with them, after that. But
it's kind of great. It's kind of perfect.
Oh, it was so great. They did ask me to join the band.
They did.
Because eventually Steve did decide to depart to play with the great Michael Monroe of Hanoi Rocks, but. I was I was just sort of aware of sort of the overall temperature on where I felt like it's interesting, because if you know that band's history, basically the exact same thing happened to them twice.
I don't know that.
They came out, when they originally came out, it was the thing in New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, a young John Cummings, before he was Johnny Ramone, was getting glammed up with his high school buddies and driving from Queens into Manhattan to see the New York Dolls play the Mercer Arts Center. Yeah. And that was where he got his idea to be a musician from, in a lot of ways. So, it already had this special reverence there in the city, but then it very quickly spread because it was such a a captivating like experience seeing this band, you know, and such a wide range of emotions you experience when watching them play, at least for me. That I think it just really stuck with people, and became hugely influential. And so, you know, the band basically made a couple of records and just got slowly smaller and smaller till they just kind of were like, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to go do that. And we're not, I don't know. I'm not sure if there was ever a moment where it was like, you know, we're dissolving this officially, but
that's what happened.
Yeah, that's what happened. And so when they reunited, they basically reunited because one of the people that they like really majorly influenced, the singer Morrissey, asked the band to get back together.
This is like early 2000s or something? Okay.
And they went over to England to play, you know, a show for Morrissey. And it was like, oh, well, I guess this went really good. You know, we'll keep going. And I'm trying to remember who the original drummer of the Dolls was, but he when they went to England, I think it was for the first time or whatever, he died.
Oh, wow.
And when the Dolls got back together to play with Morrissey, the bass player, Arthur Killer Kane, had been working as a librarian.
Yeah.
And it was his dream to get the band back together. So it finally happens, and it happens in this really cool, amazing way where Morrissey calls them over to England and they all go over there, play the gig. Arthur Kane dies like the next day.
God. Oh my God. That is so crazy.
Isn't that insane? And so, you know, so even like some of those things were like parallels both times that the band did its thing. And so I was just I think I was just sort of aware of the fact that, it probably wasn't going to be, I think the tour that they were doing when I got asked to join the band was a first of 3, like shed tour. It was the New York Dolls, Motley Crue, and Poison.
Oh my God.
And I just thought,
that doesn't bode well.
It's like a crime that the New York Dolls are like opening for Poison and Motley Crue. Like Poison and Motley Crue wouldn't exist without the New York, you know, like.
Oh man. Yeah. The writing was on the wall.
Yeah. It was just I just didn't see that, you know, I didn't see me having a place in that, you know? And so, but you know, what was great, it was when I stepped away from doing the Dolls, Syl and I remained close. And so when Syl was doing his various Sylvain projects, I participated in those with him, which was really great. Amazing. You know, so I got to have that extended time with him.
Amazing.
But and you know, and there were others, you know, Marc Cohn, you know, of Walking in Memphis fame. I worked with him and his band. Chris Barron of the Spin Doctors. Worked with him in a band called the Time Bandits. That was really cool. That was at times like this crazy all-star lineup where it would, I remember one night we played in New York and it was me and Chris on guitar and Joe Russo on drums and John Popper from Blues Traveler playing harmonica, and Mike Gordon from Phish was the bass player. Crazy. You know, so there, you know, sometimes that gig would get really fun like that, and we were, you know, just jamming and getting to play. And Chris, what I loved about Chris was he never shied away from being a hit songwriter.
Right.
So we would play those songs.
Sure.
You know,
was into it.
And people would just go
lose
crazy, man. It was so fun, you know. So there was a bunch of stuff like that, and I just kind of kept my head down through all of it. I wasn't sure, you know, where I was quite going at that time, but I was still writing a lot of songs, you know.
Is that what brought on the kind of the last thing I wanted to ask you about was the move to Nashville? It's you know, that's another big move, especially if you don't really know people in a certain area. But what was it about this town that drew you here? Was it the songwriting stuff and the history here, or was it something else?
It was the songwriting, for sure. You know, New York was such a great place to be at that time because when I first got there, it was 2004. The Strokes had just happened.
Yep.
Norah Jones had just happened.
Right.
You know, all out of New York. You know, and so I mean, talk about like opposite ends of the spectrum too.
Yep.
Like Norah Jones and the Strokes. I mean, that's like, and there's so much music in between those two places, and you know, and MGMT was firing off, but so was the Hold Steady, and Craig Finn was living in Brooklyn at the time. It was really cool, but I was, you know, very, you know, influenced as a songwriter by folks like who you mentioned earlier, certainly Prine, Elliott Smith, Petty, Jeff Lynne, certainly Bowie. And it was kind of funny just the way the music business was at that time. I remember one time a music business guy came to see me play in New York, and his comment after the show, he goes, you know, what you're doing is it's so uncool that it almost has gone the whole way
Right back to being cool.
around to being cool again. You know, that was sort of like his assessment
Thanks, man.
of it. You know, and you know, yeah, there was something about Nashville.
Did you have a musical connection here personally, or
Todd
you did?
Snyder.
Oh, Todd Snyder. Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd met him on tour or
Touring.
something? Okay.
And he
He's a bit of a magnet, that guy.
and I mean, yeah, and talk about songwriting.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus, you know, one of the best.
Man, I saw him at the Ryman, I don't know, 6-8 months ago.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone captivate an audience solo like that. Like I've seen a lot of solo shows.
Yeah.
But he did something that I've never seen before.
It is like it's like having an audience with Mark Twain or something.
Kinda,
you know,
yeah.
it's like poetry in human form, basically. You know, it's abstract, but you understand it. The way his brain works to me is almost like a stand-up comedian or something. Like
That's how it came across to me too. Yeah.
the element of surprise
Yeah.
is so central to what he does, whether he's telling a story or singing a song.
And I don't know if he varies it wildly from night to night. Maybe he does. Maybe someone like Steve Poltz, he's like doing it from scratch every night.
Yeah.
I don't know if Todd is like that or not, but it sure comes across like he's just doing it for you that night.
What I'll notice about Todd is he will, even if he's telling a story that I've heard before, it's not a rehearsed story.
Yeah.
He sort of is telling you what he remembers about it as he's remembering it on stage.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that's a really smart way to do it, because it does end up feeling very in the moment, even if it's something that you've even heard before.
Totally.
Like it's still it is always worth paying attention to, because you might hear something that you didn't expect to, you know? And he just, for probably like 2 years or so, you know, every time I would run into him, he would just be like, oh man, I just really think, you know. And I
come here.
remember one time, I think I might have even said to him, like, I mean, I'm not really country though, you know, and he would be like, no, man, I'm talking about East Nashville. That's different, you know, like you gotta come see it, you know.
And was Prine somebody that you'd met in your travels too, or did you not have a thing with him?
I never got to meet John.
Oh, okay.
But what I got to have the experience of was a few different people telling me that John was a fan of mine.
Okay.
And the coolest, you know, most awesome one that I still think about all the time was that I was on this music cruise called Kayamo, and they had a John Prine tribute on the boat.
Fats and Dave Jakes and all those guys. Yeah.
Yep. And John also happened to be on the boat at the time, which I kind of was like thinking to myself, like, I was like, I wonder how John feels about this. Like, there's nowhere to go.
Still here, guys.
You know,
Still here.
it's like, yeah, he can't, you know, was he going to helicopter or something? But I got asked to be one of the artists that participated in it. And
Oh, so you did a song of his.
I had my band with me at the time, and I used to do this sort of very revved up, you know, kind of Heartbreakers-esque version of Lake Marie.
Oh, cool.
where we would get super dynamic in terms of the chorus and then coming down for the talking verses and stuff. But me and my guitar player were both playing electric guitars, and we had this little riff worked out that we would play on the chorus, you know, to kind of add a little something there. That was our kind of our own take on it. And so we did that. And, you know, I thought we did a pretty good version of it that night or whatever. But yeah, a lot of times these things, you know, you just kind of do them and you move on or whatever. But I was somewhere in the ship the next day, and I got a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around, and it was John's guitar player, Jason Wilbur. And Jason said, hey man, John's been looking for you today, but he told me what he wanted to tell you. So if he doesn't find you, I just wanted to let you know, like, you were his favorite last night.
Whoa, that's so cool.
He was really hoping, if there's time, that maybe you could show him that riff you were doing. He wants to play it that way.
Whoa.
Which I just,
That's so cool, man.
I mean,
yeah.
I remember thinking one time I was watching a documentary about Jeff Buckley making the album Grace. Yeah. And he said something in it like, my goal in music is just to try to give back to music what music has given me. And I really identified with that. And I felt like in some small way, I kind of got to do that in that moment. Like I got to repay John Prine.
Amazing.
You know, by doing a version of his song that he liked, you know, after he had just meant the world to me for as long as I can remember.
Amazing.
Hearing his music, which I heard first when I was like 13, so long time. That's what, you know, what I do like about Nashville. I don't know if you feel this way, but coming from New York, it was sometimes a challenge, like you see these people all over the place. You know, I walked across the street next to Lou Reed one time, but I didn't dare say a word. You know, I watched somebody else say something to him after we got across the street.
You made the right call.
Yeah, man, I nailed this one. Like, I'm smarter than that idiot. You know, I shouldn't say that. They're not an idiot. You know, it was kind of hard to like get to know those people a lot in New York. Like you kind of had to have several sort of experiences with them in some sort of social setting before they would kind of let the wall down a little bit and like accept you. And I did get to meet some musicians there that I really admired, like Charlie Drayton and Andy Hess and Tony Shearer and Jim Campolongo, certainly, and Catherine Popper and all these, Jesse Malin and all these great folks. But yeah, it was hard to get to know them sometimes because, you know, there is that New York kind of gruffness too, but it's like here
kind of doesn't happen in the same way.
It really doesn't. People are just, I don't know if it's like a Southern thing or something. They're just like more open somehow, or like they're not like Audley Freed, who's like, to me, one of the greatest living rock guitar players. And
one of the nicest guys on the planet.
He couldn't be nicer.
I know, right?
And he's so real too. Like I remember one time, like we were doing this Neil Young tribute thing together, and I was like looking at his pedal board, and I was like, hey man, like I've never seen that pedal, like what does it do or whatever. And Audley said, man, I can't even tell when it's on.
I love that he keeps it on his pedal board though.
I know, right? I was just thinking that. I was like, and yet there it is, you know, just in case.
Well, hey man, I've taken up lots of your time here. Thanks.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Yeah, love your music. Looking forward to hearing what you're coming up with.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, everybody. Music Makers and Soul Shakers podcast is produced at the Hen House Studio in East Nashville, Tennessee. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can find more info on this episode, including show notes and an audio playlist for Spotify and Apple Music at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Thank you again to our sponsors this season, Union Tube and Transistor, Spectra in 1964, the Deering Banjo Company, Mule Resonator Guitars, and the Hen House Hang. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for another chilling episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. Over and out.